In a recent article put out by the San Antonio Board of Realtors Chairman Cher McCulka, I hope I said that right. The sale of your home can unravel for a number of reasons, and I'm going to go give you the top 3 reasons that this happens. And I really want to get y'all, since you guys are experts in the field and do this on a daily basis, I'd like to get your feedback on it. So first, of course, buyers can change their minds, right? I mean, that's just kind of what they do. Hopefully it doesn't happen a whole lot. Next, a bad home inspection. I think this is where sellers, we kind of get a little bit afraid, right? Is this going to go bad, right? A little bit of anxiety can surround that. And then, of course, third, buyer's loan is rejected. So let's talk a little bit about buyers changing their minds. If the buyer put a termination option into the contract, they have the ability to terminate the deal for any reason within the time specified, as long as it is within the scope of the termination option. So my question to you guys, and Noah, let me start with you. Does this happen often that you've seen?
Yeah. Luckily not a lot. I mean, part of our job as buyer's agents is to really instill confidence in our clients. I have had it a few times where people just wake up and they, whether they had a dream and they're like, the dream freaked them out. They don't want the house anymore. They scrolled on realtor.com and found something else they wanted.
Oh.
So just plain cold feet. It does happen. I'd say in this market though, it's a lot less than it used to be because there's a lot less to choose from. So buyers, they feel like there's a little bit more, once they got the house because there's not much left to find. And so they don't want to give it up.
So what kind of an impact, just to carry this conversation maybe a little bit in a different direction, as far as what is the impact, the psychological impact, the emotional impact, maybe on a seller who's been like, okay, hey, we're going to do this. And then the buyer terminates that deal real quick. As far as, I mean, you've had plenty of sellers, Gasper.
Sure. And that's a very good question. When a buyer decides to exercise their option to back out for whatever reason it may be, it can sometimes kind of stigmatize the property, and other people will start to think, well, what's wrong with it? Did something bad happen? Did they find something bad in the home inspection? Well, there's all kinds of issues that can pop out of that. But it's actually very beneficial to both parties. The seller, for actually allowing it as a term of the contract, gives that buyer the opportunity to, and their agent, the time to do their due diligence, to make sure that they're doing their home inspection, to make sure that they've got the professionals that need to come in and search through this home to find anything that may actually be wrong with it, because you don't want to wind up in a money pit. Nobody ever wants that. Right. And so you want to make sure you're taking the time to do it. The seller allowing those terms in the contract and the buyer, by requesting those terms in the contract, is actually very mutually agreeable for both sides to work well. I'm
thinking from the seller's perspective that I'd be a little leery of somebody that maybe had to terminate for now, I get it for the home inspection reason, right? Mm-hmm. But to terminate because, the moon wasn't in the right place in the sky at the time that I signed the contract, just that more, those liberal kind of ability to do that. Do you see that happening very often?
I don't, and like Noah said, I don't find it in this market as much as we used to when we had, right now we're about a month and a half of inventory in most places. Back when we were about 4.5 months, you would see that more often for people to back out. So we don't see it too often.
The tighter the market gets,
absolutely,
the more apt people are to start putting these types of things in.
Yeah, they'll put that off when there's not as many options sitting on the table out there.
Okay, awesome. All right, so when it comes to a bad home inspection, I think this is the one that we're all familiar with, right? Like the foundation's not good. You know what I mean? All the windows in the house need to be replaced, or whatever. Give me maybe the top 1 or 2 things that you've seen within your career where somebody will find something and that breaks the deal for them.
Yeah. Foundation is probably number one. And cracks that look like they might be from the foundation. That's one of those things that
scares everybody.
Yeah, it scares everybody. Even if they're, and not getting too much into it, but there's different types of cracks that mean different things, right? But any buyer, especially first-time home buyer, they go in, they see cracks, they just think cracks.
It's like cracks in the ceiling, in the walls.
Right. So there's cracks where drywall separates because the house moved.
Sure.
That's normal. But buyers go in there and they see it and they go, especially if they don't know what they're looking at, they freak out.
Okay.
And so, any type of cracks, foundation cracks, and really, mean, that's the biggest one. I think electrical is scary to people because, you know,
I would think plumbing would probably be like one of those that would really freak people out because
Yeah.
especially if you got a 2-story house, you got a bad water heater or something on the first floor or the sink's leaking or whatever. It seems like that'd be pretty scary. But what's an example of maybe an electrical issue that pops up? People are like,
yeah. So I actually had one last month. The house was built in 1940, I believe it was, and had all the original electrical. But the buyers had swapped out all the outlets to make it look like it was 3-prong.
Oh.
So none of the electrical outlets were grounded.
oh my gosh.
Yeah. So we had an electrician go in there, and he was like, "Yep." He's like, you plug anything in here, it could get fried, that kind of stuff.
So that was during the home inspection.
Yeah,
that they found it.
and we took it a step further. Had an electrician go out there. My client still ended up wanting the house, so he got it, and he got a good deal on it. But
Well, that's just, I mean, can't you get into negotiation there?
yeah,
Right?
that's
I
what
mean,
we
absolutely.
did. That's what we
Yeah.
did. Yeah.
Cool. All right. So, and then third, the buyer's loan is rejected. So, Gasper, give me your thoughts on, obviously, I think the buyer's probably going to be worried about this too, right? I mean, talk a little bit about your experience with loan rejection and maybe the psychological impact that it can have, but also does it hurt the property as well? I wouldn't think it would, but I don't know.
Whenever a transaction is occurring and a offer is accepted and everything starts to move down the line towards closing, dependent on the type of loan that you're using, let's say that it's a VA, FHA, USDA, a government-backed loan, there's going to be specific regulations and different things that and guidelines that are required from the lenders on those specific loans. They're not conventional, so conventionals are obviously a little bit easier, a little bit cheaper to do overall. But as they progress through, let's say that it is a government-backed loan, there's going to be restrictions that may pop up. Let's say that they need to see a hydrostatic test on the plumbing because there was some foundation work. If the seller cannot provide that hydrostatic foundation or that hydrostatic plumbing test, then what can occur is they will stop the loan. They will not fund that loan. So that
And
would be
they
something-
being who?
the lender.
The
The
lender.
lender, it won't meet the requirements, and so that'll be one of the reasons why the loan will
How does
not.
the lender become aware of that? Does the lender get these reports as well?
Yeah, through the appraisal. When the appraisers come in and they start to do their work, and of course, they're pulling all the tax data and then permits and different things that have occurred on the history of this home. So title company and everyone working in unison is pretty much able to see the history of whatever's going on with the property. And then, of course, there's disclosure. We as the seller and the seller's agent are required to let the buyers know what they're getting into. That's the legal part of it.
Right, but Noah, so in a situation like the electrical part, was that something that was on the disclosure, or is that something that is found after the fact?
So it was something that's found after the fact. The appraiser has they don't inspect the electrical. So we basically got a little glimpse from the inspector and decided, hey, let's have an electrician just double check. And then he was like, yeah,
Is that something that, in your opinion, should have been disclosed?
That, to my knowledge, doesn't have to be disclosed on the seller's disclosure because that's the age of the house.
Seems like if you're not going to ground your outlets, that's something that people should know about, because that's a fire hazard.
I think the part that was a little fishy was the outlets were 3-prong outlets, making it look like they were grounded.
Yeah.
But they weren't.
Yeah.
So that was where it got a little, hey, you should have, if you're going to put in these outlets, but obviously there's no way to connect it, you should have said something.
Well, so in detective school, that's what they would have called a clue.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.